Hello, everyone, and welcome to the first Learning Views webinar of 2019, sponsored by TrainingPros and Harrisburg University. We want to thank all the attendees for registering and being a part of our webinar today. TrainingPros is, as you know, is a highly specialized staffing organization that focuses on learning and development and organizational change management. We have a cadre of expert relationship managers, a very large talent pool of consultants that are folks that work with us on a consistent basis. And we have a very proven onboarding and successful methodology for bringing our people on board and getting them to be a part of our TrainingPros family. So if you have any questions or you would like to get more information, please contact us at trainingpros.com or at info@trainingpros.com for further information. My name is David Amborski. I am the Vice President of Enterprise Learning Solutions for TrainingPros. I have been working in the learning and change management space for 35 plus years and have a extensive experience, particularly in manufacturing and some of the industrial sectors. My primary knowledge of training and change management work has been done over the last 20 plus years in the enterprise resource planning space, such as SAP, Oracle, PeopleSoft, and Infor. And we are heading up a new service line called Training as a Service that's focused on these enterprise resource planning systems. So would welcome you to take a look at that on the website. So from a talent point of view, TrainingPros has a large cadre of people in instructional design, coordination of training, typing, editing, copywriting, those types of things, as well as change management and technical communication. So this is the broad base of services that are available from our firm, and we welcome you to take a look at some of those things. TrainingPros has this partnership with Harrisburg University, and this is very important to us. We really value our relationship with the university and are partnering, excuse me, our partnering has been very valuable to us, both with our clients and with recruiting consultants, as we demonstrate through these Learning View webinar series some of the insights and the thought leadership, both from the university and from our consulting team and our management team. So the partnership has been working very well. We really have enjoyed our relationship with Harrisburg, and we look forward to several more of these webinar series going forward in the future. And so so be on the lookout for registration for other topics that are coming up. We would like to also acknowledge that our speaker today is he is a recognized program manager and a change leader, process improvement professional. John O'Rourke has over 30 years experience in program management and project release management initiatives. John and I also collaborated on a book that we authored, and that's been a very popular iBook, and you can go out on iBooks and actually download a copy of it for free. The name of the book is called Practitioner's Guide to Change Management. And he and I have been frequent contributors to LinkedIn, and John's been a presenter on projectmanagement.com and done several things. So John has a great track record of implementing and driving and adopting new processes. He's going to talk about a very exciting topic today, and I'm very happy to have him on board. And I am particularly happy because he is one of the people that I can call a true friend. And I am really happy to have him on board and working with us on this at TrainingPros. So John, please take it away and introduce yourself and your topics.
Thanks, Dave. I want to thank everyone for taking the time today to attend the Change Management and Robotic Processing Automation webinar. The objective of today's webinar is to introduce the concept of RPA from a change management perspective, while also discussing its impact on organizations and their employees. RPA will have a far-reaching impact on how people will work, and it will also impact current business processes, existing job roles, and organizational alignment. But first off, as per the title of the presentation, what is a bot? As per Wikipedia, a bot is also known as a web robot. Basically, it's a software application that runs automated tasks or scripts over the internet. One of the most common types of bot is a chatbot. Essentially, a chatbot is just an application that imitates human conversations through voice commands, text chats, or both. Alexa, Siri, Google Assistant are essentially bots. One drawback to bots is that they are only as good as they are programmed to be. As you may have experienced, chatbots may stumble over anything beyond basic requests, and some of them may have a problem understanding various accents. So Justin, can you post the job roles polling question? So just so we get an understanding of the audience a little better, let's do 2 quick polls. If you could fill that out. Excellent. So we have a couple of project managers, program managers, change managers, and another other category. It seems pretty heavy, so I want to thank you for participating. Okay, RPA is Robotic Processing Automation. We'll take questions. I'll take most of the questions at the end. So let's look at polling question number 2. And this is just to give us an idea of if anyone is in the audience whose organization may be implementing RPA in the future. Excellent. Okay, a couple of people are planning on implementing it, so hopefully you'll find this information very helpful. Okay, so thanks, Justin. So today's webinar will be divided into 2 sections, the first part being an overview of RPA. We will cover topics such as what is RPA, how RPA differs from artificial intelligence, and how RPA is portrayed in the media. We will also touch on why organizations implement RPA and why RPA implementations may fail. This should take approximately 20 minutes. In the second part of the presentation, we will discuss what change managers must do in order to prepare organizations and their employees for this technology, including how to plan for the change, how to identify the risks, and finally understand the change challenges that will impact 5 key areas such as stakeholders, business processes, staffing, communications, and metrics. And again, this should take approximately 20 minutes, and then we'll have some time for Q&A. So let us proceed. What is robotic processing automation? There are a number of good definitions out on the internet, but One that I like is from the Institute for Robotic Process Automation and Artificial Intelligence. Basically, it says RPA is an application that captures information from other applications for processing transactions, manipulating data, triggering responses, and communicating with other systems. In simpler terms, RPA is the automation of clerical work, and it could be considered the office-based equivalent of production line robots. So there are a number of processes that are ideal for RPA, and they have some, if not all, of the following characteristics. They are repetitive in nature and prone to human error. They have very little variability. They have clearly defined steps or rules. Step 1, do this. Step 2, do that. Step 3, take this action. So for example, in insurance, RPA could be used in claims processing and generating renewals. In financial services, RPA could be used in reconciliation tasks. RPA could also be used in processing credit card or new mortgage applications. And human resources could use RPA in the onboarding process or in benefits administration. So let's talk now about a concept called automation progression. Basically, automation ranges from systems that do to systems that think to systems that are able to learn. On the far left would be macros, screen scraping tools, and scripts. Next would be RPA, which would be located between systems that do and systems that think. From an automation perspective, they are relatively basic solutions. They mimic humans in the use of keyboard and mouse. They can handle structured processes and are triggered by an event. Next would be artificial intelligence, or AI. It is the technology between systems that think and systems that can learn. AI makes it possible for a computer to learn from experience. Some examples of AI include IBM Watson playing chess, self-driving cars, social media feeds, etc. You may have heard the terms deep learning and natural language processing. Using these technologies, computers can be trained to accomplish specific tasks by processing large amounts of data and recognizing patterns in the data. These technologies are subsets of artificial intelligence. So there's a lot of information about RPA in the news. This is my favorite headline, and it's an article by Xavier Lure, a partner at McKinsey. It talks about the potential ROI, but the best part is that bottom part in the red, employees may like it too. And the reason why I point this out is because the main driver of RPA's return on investment is headcount reduction. So, which leads to the next slide, RPA's impact on jobs. So there are 3 headlines here. Fortune.com reports a new study by McKinsey, which estimates that as many as 800 million jobs will be automated in the next 13 years. The second headline is from an article by Paul Ratner, in which he quotes a study where up to a third of all American jobs will be lost to automation by 2030. And finally, USA Today, where they have an article that says 73 million jobs will be lost by 2030. There's also another school of thought that says job losses will not be that bad. Here are 2 headlines. The first is from CMS Wire, why automation might not be as bad for jobs as predicted. And number 2 is a headline from The Verge, AI and robots will destroy fewer jobs than previously feared, says a new OECD report. Now, OECD stands for Organization for Economic Cooperation and Development. It is an intergovernmental economic organization with 36 member countries. But I just want you to be cautious about when you Google RPA and jobs. On the previous slide, the same McKinsey study was the basis for all 3 articles. But Fortune, Paul Ratner, and USA Today reported on slightly differently. And on this side, the same OECD study was the basis for both of these headlines. So you have to be careful. You just can't count up the number of headlines that have these issues with jobs because it could be from the same data source. So next is, why organizations implement RPA. There are many reasons, but 3 in particular are most frequently mentioned. quality, delivery, and cost. So from a quality perspective, all of the software platforms that run RPA typically offer full audit logs that track and record every action that robots perform within automation. RPA reduces risk. Risk management is improved because there is no inconsistency in the execution of business rules. Also, from a compliance perspective, sensitive data can be hidden from people and only processed by computers. There's error-free processing. RPA eliminates human error. Even the most careful employee can make an occasional mistake. Next is variation. Since bots are programmed, there is no deviation in output. And finally, employee satisfaction. When employees are no longer working on boring, repetitive, and mundane tasks, job satisfaction levels will normally rise. The next reason organizations implement RPA is delivery. RPA allows tasks to be completed quicker and at a higher level of accuracy. This increases the amount of work that can be completed. Since processing is not limited by set hours, for example 9 to 5, customer response times may be reduced. Combine this with the low risk of errors and maybe customer satisfaction will increase. And finally, operational 24/7. There are no sick days, vacation time, or lunch hours. There is no downtime except if the process has changed and the software needs to be modified. And finally, cost is a reason organizations implement RPA. Processing costs are reduced. While implementing RPA requires an upfront investment, the overall increase in efficiency and productivity, as well as reduction in human errors, can offset the expense. A positive ROI is realized faster. You will find that most of the RPA marketing materials will use anywhere between 20 and 50% labor savings. And on the slide from McKinsey, claims it could reach 200%. Just be careful when quoting these statistics. Your results will vary depending on the type of processes automated. Next is scaling. RPA removes the relationship between volume of work and headcount. And finally, training costs are minimized. Why? Well, you do not need to add new resources as production is increased. If anything, there might be an additional training cost incurred if employees are redeployed into new roles and they have to be reskilled. So let's talk about return on investment. There are three major cost drivers with an RPA implementation: cost of the software, cost to implement, and the cost to support the application in the production environment. Supporting the application in the production environment may require additional resources or new headcount. What are the benefits? While reduction in headcount is one of the major cost reductions, there are also benefits that can be documented, such as reduction in errors, productivity gains. There are going to be less resources needed to do the same amount of work, increases in customer satisfaction, and increases in compliance and reduction in risk. Some of these items may not be as easy to estimate as headcount reduction, but they should be reflected in any analysis. So, what could possibly go wrong? When implementing RPA, there are many risks, but there are three major areas of concern: organizational, process, and technical. So the number one failure of organizational change is lack of leadership support. Are all leaders on board with the initiative? Is the business and IT talking to each other and setting expectations, defining deliverables and timelines? Does IT have the necessary resources and knowledge to implement and support RPA? Does IT have other more important and critical deliverables that they need to focus on? Who is in charge of the project? Line of business or IT, or is it a joint effort? Also, who are your subject matter experts? Will they have the time or desire to assist with the project? And finally, is there a strong project management or change management team in place? The second thing that could go wrong when implementing RPA is designing the solution. You need to choose a process with significant business impact, but it cannot be too complex or unstable. A process that is constantly subject to change is a poor choice for RPA. And do not choose a process to automate where a better non-technical solution exists. And finally, from a cost-benefit position, do not choose a process to automate where it is not cost-effective to actually automate. The third item that could go wrong is from a technical perspective. Does the IT department have the resources with the necessary expertise to implement and support the processes that you want to automate? Is the process too complex and prone to errors? Does IT have the correct tools to adequately test the algorithm? I touched on this before when I was speaking about improved efficiency and that RPA allows tasks to be completed faster. This efficiency can become a risk if there is an error in the algorithm. For example, assume a bot is performing a calculation to determine if an applicant meets the requirements for a loan or a credit card. And due to an error in the algorithm, the bot approves applicants who should not be approved. The bot is able to process thousands of applications per minute. What kind of impact will that faulty algorithm have on an organization? It would be pretty large, I would imagine. But this risk can be mitigated through the testing process. So we need to make sure that there is a robust testing process in place so that there are no unintended consequences to the bot. And finally, the task content has to be machine readable. So if PDF files, for example, are being used, they need to be converted into a format that the computer can read. And finally, the post-implementation. This is an item that could go wrong after RPA has been implemented. Post-implementation issues can slow down or even stop organizations with the further use of RPA. There will be concerns about which organizational unit will lead future initiatives. Is it going to be the business or IT? Will additional resources be needed as RPA usage expands? Is the PMO trained to manage these types of projects? And what about risk and compliance and corporate governance? Is the corporate structure in place to manage and expand the use of RPA? And finally, maintenance. Who is going to monitor and maintain all of the bots that have been implemented? Who is going to keep all of the documentation up to date? Who is responsible for maintaining the bots? Is it going to be the process owners or IT or a combination of both? What is the change control process? So while RPA is powerful, it definitely has issues that must be addressed. So to summarize, RPA is an algorithm that can solve specific problems. It is a way to automate mundane and repeatable tasks. It's a way to create an enhanced customer experience and a way to reduce operating costs. And finally, it's a method to reduce risk and improve process quality. And to summarize, RPA is not a physical robot, nor is it a replacement for employees. And finally, it is not artificial intelligence. So that is the end of the RPA overview. Justin, can you release the third poll? Okay, good. Thank you for that feedback. So there are many definitions of change management, but the one I like the best is change management helps organizations react to business changes and the transition to new business processes with as little resistance and lost productivity as possible. My favorite quote about change management is, "It is not that people do not like change, Rather, they do not like to be changed. But people are usually very supportive of other people changing. So the primary goals of change management are to avoid unnecessary turnover or loss of valued employees, minimize the impact on productivity, reduce the possibility of a negative impact on customers, and achieve the desired business results as quickly as possible. Now, RPA is similar to any large organizational change initiative. Managing the change will be a challenge, but when the change is introduced in a carefully planned and managed approach, the change initiative can be successful. So let's start with the positive aspect of managing change. Confidence. Let's start small and get some quick wins. When you successfully implement a few RPA bots, the employees will have a better understanding of the change, and hopefully their fears will be alleviated, and they may actually begin to embrace the change. Next, we have growth. By implementing RPA correctly, your organization is technically becoming more efficient and shows the employees that the organization has the ability to facilitate change and grow. Next is adaptability. A corporate culture that embraces change is one that tends to be a leader in their field. Look at all the major companies, Apple, Amazon, Microsoft, that are willing to change and reinvent themselves over and over again. And customers. The ability for your organization to implement RPA may create an advantage over the competition. In addition, by implementing RPA, the organization could reallocate resources into more customer-facing activities and in turn improve the customer experience, which would then hopefully result in increased sales. So while we have positive impacts to change initiatives, there are also negative ones. These impacts are not strictly related to RPA. They are more general in nature and can impact any change initiative. Management. The first and most important barrier to a successful change initiative is management. If management does not support the RPA change, it will fail. When I say management, this includes senior executives, middle and line managers. If they do not support RPA, the employees will not support it, and they will resist the change. Employees are another barrier to a successful change initiative. Normally, they will resist any change initiative, but if the project has management support and the change team implements a comprehensive communication plan, most of the resistance can be mitigated. If employees are not provided the information about the change, or if they do not understand the change message, resistance to the change may occur. One of the main purposes of the change message is to reassure the employees and alleviate some of the angst they may feel as a result of the change. Next is cost. Failure is expensive. The cost is not just in money. What about all of the time spent and the resources that could have been working on other projects? What about the resulting poor productivity and low employee morale going back to the old processes? What about the cost of losing key employees? And finally, customers feel the effect of change initiatives. Will the change cause damage to the organization's reputation? What is the customer's perception of the change? What if the change fails? Will customers leave and go to a competitor? So to summarize, the RPA change needs to be planned. So there is a direct relationship between the scope of the change and risk. The greater the change, the higher probability of employee resistance, resulting in a higher risk to a project. The amount of change management planning required to reduce project risk increases in proportion to the disruption caused by the change and the number of people impacted. RPA will require a significant change management effort to reduce project risk because 1, a new technology is being introduced. That's a disruption. 2, business processes are changing. That's another disruption. And 3, employees are being impacted. So from a risk perspective, that's a trifecta. And as it relates to the graphic, an RPA initiative would be located somewhere in the top right quadrant. The next 4 slides are going to show specific examples of risk and the impact to an organization and ways to mitigate it. These are general examples of risk and not specific to RPA initiatives only. So the first scenario is when the executive team disagrees on the RPA strategy. Executive alignment is crucial for any organization to accomplish their strategic business goals. So if the executive team disagrees on the RPA strategy, the success of the initiative is at risk. Anything that causes confusion to other stakeholders, especially coming from the executive team, can be detrimental to the success of an initiative. If senior managers and line managers think a project will fail, they will drop their support very quickly. So the change manager will need to investigate and find out why there is a disagreement and who the person or persons are with questions. These concerns need to be addressed immediately. Once you have resolved the conflict and received confirmation of everyone's support, then it will need to be communicated to the organization. In the worst case scenario, the message may have to come from the top executives of an organization. Risk number 2 is similar to the first risk, except it is at the line of business level. Again, the change manager will need to identify the gap, analyze it, and address it immediately. Once the issue has been resolved and everyone confirms their support, it will need to be communicated to the organization. This message would come from the executive team. Risk number 3 occurs when an organization adds RPA on top of other major change initiatives that are already occurring. Stakeholders are overwhelmed, they start to push back, and resistance to the initiative may occur. The change manager will need to work with the PMO to understand all of the other initiatives that are occurring and plan the execution of RPA appropriately. And finally, risk number 4, employee resistance. This is directly related to listening to your employees and addressing their concerns and issues proactively. So, how often have you seen this scenario? There's a meeting and there's a request regarding a new project. So everybody is like, oh, sounds great, can't wait, I'm all in, no problem. But that's what they say verbally. What they're thinking may be totally different. They may be asking themselves, what's in it for me? This person may be looking at it like, oh my gosh, I got another initiative. I have all these other ones I have to work on first. And then this one here is like, I don't have time for another project. And what is wrong with the old way? So some of the reasons employees resist change is that they do not believe that the change is necessary, or they are surprised by the change and they fear the unknown. They are not confident that the change will succeed, or they do not see the benefits of the change. Finally, they may fear the loss of status within the organization, or maybe even the loss of their job. So now we're going to talk about the change challenge. This is the relationship between the type of change and the change management response required. As I mentioned before, the greater the number of people impacted and the more disruptive the change is to the organization, the greater the change management effort needs to be. So for this webinar, we are focusing on 5 areas of change, and they are stakeholders. How do you identify stakeholders? Are they the correct stakeholders? What type of influence do these stakeholders exert over the project? Business processes. What processes are going to change? How will they change? What is the gap between the current process and the future process? Third is communication. How is information going to be communicated to the organization? What is the messaging, the frequency of it, and how will employees provide feedback? Number 4 is staffing. What types of skills are going to be required by implementing RPA? And finally, what are the key metrics? So who are the stakeholders? It's the leadership team, including the project sponsor, various lines of businesses, the RPA project team, and finally any person or group that exerts a positive or negative influence over the project, including customers, employees, unions, etc. Once the stakeholders have been identified, the change manager determines their requirements and documents their expectations. It's important to document each stakeholder's expectations and review them throughout the project. And as an FYI, there is usually one group of stakeholders who are not as enamored with RPA as some of your other stakeholders. It's going to be the IT department. As I talked about it before, they may have other initiatives that are more pressing, such as implementing a cloud strategy or updating the existing ERP application. So it's very important that the change manager is cognizant of other projects impacting the organization. So the next change challenge is related to the business processes. First, processes need to be identified. For each process, you need to discover who owns the process. Who are the subject matter experts? Regarding RPA, you need to understand how much of the business process can actually be automated versus what needs to remain in manual. Next, the current and future workflow processes are documented. Keeping the documentation of the future processes updated is extremely important, especially when it comes to maintaining RPA once it enters into the production environment. The next step is to identify the gap between the current and future processes. And finally, how is that gap going to be closed? And will there be any training required for those activities that remain manual? The next change challenge is staffing. This is probably the biggest change challenge. RPA has positive implications for employees. Kind of tasks that are being automated are mundane and repetitive. These positions may be filled with dissatisfied, disengaged employees who would rather be doing something more interesting and more valuable to the organization. Impact to staff is a very delicate topic for most organizations, especially if you have to acknowledge that some job roles may be negatively impacted by the processes identified. Some of these roles may be automated entirely, while others may be partially impacted. It is important to communicate that most analysis or knowledge positions cannot be replicated by RPA. Also, new job roles may be created, including RPA programmers, RPA business analysts, and RPA project managers. So let's talk about identification. Which employees are going to be impacted by RPA? You need to identify which employees are going to be reassigned to new roles. If you do need to do a layoff of employees, are you terminating the correct people? And how are you going to retain key employees, especially the subject matter experts? Next is job roles. Each impacted job role needs to be identified and documented. What new job roles are going to be created, and what is the skill set required? How are the new job roles going to be staffed? Next, we have knowledge. The primary goal is to keep the knowledge within the line of business. This goes back to retaining key employees. And finally, training. Is there a need to train the reassigned resources? What about new job roles? What are the training requirements for those positions? So here's a summary of the staffing benefits that RPA offers. Higher employee satisfaction because people are working on more interesting tasks. Reduced turnover because mundane and repetitive activities have been automated. New job roles and opportunities have been created, and these roles should be more interesting and at a higher skill level. Workflows and processes are streamlined, and finally, employee productivity increases because less people are required to produce the same amount of work. The next change challenge is communications. Whenever there is a major change in an organization, it is natural for the employees to get stressed. This is especially true with RPA. As mentioned previously, RPA may cause significant change in the responsibility of the impacted employees. It's important to ensure that clear and appropriate messaging is received by those employees. One of the primary drivers of a successful change initiative is the communication approach and strategy. It is important to clearly define the objectives, benefits, and expected outcomes of the project to the whole organization, not just the people who are directly impacted by RPA. Some of the items to include in the communication strategy are which processes are changing and what are their impacts. The change team needs to help employees understand how these changes will affect them personally. How will the organization be different because of the change? Communicate the reasons for the change in such a way that employees understand the context, purpose, and the need. And who are the employees impacted by the change, and in what way? The message to them should be proactive. There are certain best practices that should be followed as part of the communication strategy. It is important to communicate consistently, frequently, and through multiple channels. Clearly communicate the vision, the mission, and the objectives of the change management effort. Communicate all that is known about the changes as quickly as the information is available. In addition, provide an opportunity for employees to provide feedback. And finally, manage misinformation, especially gossip. So, one final word on communication. Stephen Covey has a great quote. Most people do not listen with the intent to understand. They listen with the intent to reply. That is so true. Next is this rule of 7. The rule of 7 is one of the oldest concepts in marketing, and we can apply it to the communication strategy for RPA. The rule of 7 simply says that the prospective buyer should hear or see the marketing message at least 7 times before they buy it from you. So remember that people learn through various ways. Some individuals can understand the RPA concept the first time it is explained to them. Some people will never understand it by hearing it, and they must see it. They are visual learners. People are wired differently, so be flexible in choosing the method and communicating to the organization. Some things will work and some things won't. And finally, let's talk about metrics. How will your organization know whether or not the RPA initiative is a success unless the metric is defined and tracked? There are 5 key RPA metrics, and they are headcount, cycle time, compliance, quality, and productivity. Regarding headcount, measure the number of employees and contractors before and after the RPA implementation process and compare the delta. Cycle time, measure the start and stop time of a back office process before and after an RPA deployment and compare it. How much time does it take to go from an input to an output in a back office process? How much time does the overall back office process take? The next is compliance. Measure compliance before and after an RPA deployment. It should be 100% after. Robots can be programmed to alert employees or managers to compliance-related issues. For example, let's say there are 3 points of validation required before a subsequent action takes place. With RPA, these criteria can be built in and compliance will be at 100%. Next is quality. Measure the output accuracy before and after the RPA deployment. Accuracy should be at 100% after the RPA implementation because robots do not deviate from the design process. If a company has installed the correct rules, correct governances, and correct decisions, the human error is eliminated completely. If accuracy is not 100%, then the RPA inputs need to be reviewed and corrected. And finally, productivity. Measure the length of time employees spend on a task versus how quickly robots complete the same task. So, as we end the webinar, I'd like to share with you 3 best practices. The first is manager endorsement. As I stated previously, it is important that line managers and supervisors be proponents of the RPA change initiative. Once their support is obtained, they can assist in managing the change engagement with their direct reports, especially if their direct reports are the employees who will be impacted directly by the RPA initiative. The other key aspect is that managers and supervisors play a crucial role in identifying and managing any resistance to change. The second best practice is the development of an RPA change plan. By creating a plan, the change manager will be able to document a clear path forward and address all of the challenges of an RPA engagement. At a minimum, the change plan should include the reasons for the change, what are the expected benefits, who will be impacted, and who are the stakeholders, and finally, the communication plan. Other key aspects of the change plan is the inclusion of the stakeholders' expectations, and these should be reviewed throughout the project and updated if the situation changes. Finally, members of the change management team, the milestones, and budget should also be included in the change plan. So how do you create the plan? Easy. Just Google change management plan. There are templates on the internet that will help change managers organize and document all of the key aspects of the change plan. The book that Dave Amborski mentioned that we had written, Practitioner's Guide to Change Management, has over 20 templates that you can use. So there's no need to recreate the wheel. And finally, the final best practice is, how will you know that your project is a success? The success criteria should be defined by your stakeholders. Are they looking to reduce cost, increase productivity, reduce headcount, increase sales, improve the customer experience? These items should be documented and approved before starting the project. And as the change initiative progresses, the criteria may need to be reviewed and, if necessary, modified. So that concludes my presentation. And now we have time for questions.
We had one question come through, John, that I'm going to put into the chat window, into the main chat area. So I've pasted it there. So if you want to read that one and provide some feedback for Tom, that would be a good starting point. And if anyone else has questions, just start adding them to the chat there. We have a few minutes to answer.
Well, that's a very good question, Tom. So basically he's asking how much work needs to be done prior to starting to build a few RPA bots. So you need to look at the process itself and have it defined so that it meets the criteria for that we spoke about it before in the beginning of the presentation. Does it meet that criteria? And using Visio is usually a good tool to use to map out the whole process, and then you can see exactly the decision points and where RPA can be used. So you really need to have your processes defined up front before you even implement RPA. Does that answer your question? Thank you. Any other questions? Okay, if not, back to you, Justin.
All right. Thank you very much, John, and thank you for the introduction. David, I'm going to walk through just a couple slides here, and then we'll get to our feedback slide. So just stick around with us for a couple minutes while we wrap up here. So to echo David's sentiment from the beginning, working with TrainingPros is a very valuable relationship for us at Harrisburg University. It allows us to bring you content like the webinar today and future webinars. So certainly reach out to TrainingPros for any of their services or any sort of partnerships that you might be interested in with them. We've provided their contact information on a few slides here. For Harrisburg University, if you have anybody that's interested in learning technologies, Master of Science, that's a degree that we offer here that's very application based and really focusing on cutting edge learning technology. So if anybody whose alley that's up, then certainly reach out to us here. There's a link provided on the slide here. We have many professional education offerings. We have all different topics here, but mainly focusing on STEM topics. So science, technology, mathematics. So feel free to visit our professional education, see if any offerings there align with your needs, or if you have want to reach out for any partnerships. That's a good group to get with. And we do have one coming up that's related to the topic of today's session. So the link's turned blue for me there. So there's a link on there. It's an analytics summit. And you can see that the topics there include AI and machine learning and deep learning and visualization. So I believe that's held on campus here in Harrisburg, so might not be for everybody. If you know anybody that's going to be in the area, it's going to be a great summit. It's going to be a good place to meet people that are interested in these topics. So if you want to grab that link, you can do that now. And that's it for these shameless plugs. So I'm going to kick it to the feedback loop here. Just let us know how we did, and we're always trying to improve these webinars. And thank you very much for joining. We'll look for you on the next webinar, and I hope you have a great rest of your day and weekend. So thanks a lot.